Now, the greatest radio shows of all time.
Suspense.
The Shadow Node.
Washington calling David Harding, counter-spy.
Classic radio theater.
The Great Gildersleeve.
Fibber McGee and Molly.
Dragnet. Gunsmoke.
The Lone Ranger.
Now, step back into a time machine with your host, Wyatt Cox.
Good evening, friends of the Inner Sanctum.
We go back 72 years to November 5th, 1950. Escape, and an adaptation of the George R. Smith novel, Earth Abides. It is a two-part episode. You'll hear it this Saturday and next Saturday on many of these stations. And we thank you for tuning in. On this Saturday, the 5th day of November, 309th day of the year, 56 days remaining until we get to 2023. Nat Turner, American slave leader, tried, convicted, and sentenced to death in Virginia on this date in 1831. In 1862, Abraham Lincoln removed George B. McClellan as commander of the Union Army for the second and final time. In defiance of the law, suffragette Susan B. Anthony voted for the first time on this date in 1872 and was later fined $100. George B. Selden granted the first U.S. patent for an automobile in 1895. In 1940, Franklin Delano Roosevelt elected to his third term as President of the United States. And in 1968, Republican Richard M. Nixon, the former Vice President and Senator, won the presidency in what turned out to be a decades-long realignment election.
I have received a very gracious message from the Vice President. I have also had a telephone conversation with him. I congratulated him for his gallant and courageous fight. I also told him that as he finished this campaign, that I know exactly how he felt. I know how it feels to lose a close one. Having lost a close one 8 years ago and having won a close one this year, I can say this: winning's a lot more fun.
Now, analysts have argued the 1968 election a major realigning election as it permanently disrupted the New Deal coalition that had dominated presidential politics for 36 years. Nixon winning the popular vote by a 0.7% point, but won easily in the Electoral College, 301 to 191. The election also featured a strong third-party effort by former Alabama Governor George Wallace, a vocal advocate for racial segregation in public schools. He carried several states in the Deep South and ran well in some ethnic enclave industrial districts in the North, the last election to date in where at least one state carried by a third-party candidate. President Nixon then winning re-election in 4 years, 1972, promising a swift end to the Vietnam War. In his concession speech, George McGovern fired harshly at the president.
When Dr. Kissinger came out and said that peace was at hand, he was misleading the people of this country. He knew what he said was false. He and Mr. Nixon knew that it was a deliberate deception, designed to fool the American people for the sake of Republican votes. Peace is not at hand. It is not even in sight.
Now, the McGovern campaign did make many mistakes and is to this day pointed to as an example of how not to run a campaign. Rabbi Meir Kahane, the founder of the far-right Koch movement, shot dead in 1990 after a speech at a New York City hotel. It was on this date in 2006, Saddam Hussein, former president of Iraq, and his co-defendants were sentenced to death in the al-Juhayd trial for their roles in the 1982 massacre of 148 Shia Muslims. That was in 2006. It was in 2007, the Android operating system, what many phones that are not Apple are founded upon to this date. Passing away on this date in history, George M. Cohan, Art Tatum, actor Ward Bond, Johnny Horton, The Battle of New Orleans. Chief O'Hare on the Batman series, Stafford Rep passing away. Also conductor Guy Lombardo. Many people in 1977 when he passed away would wonder if there would be a new year, because Guy Lombardo was well known for Auld Lang Syne. Let's see, Al Capp, the creator of Little Abner. From the musical group The Coasters, Bobby Nunn passing away. Fred MacMurray, from My Three Sons fame and many great movies. Singer-politician Jimmy Davis. The Coasters, Billy Guy, the Righteous Brothers, Bobby Hatfield, and actress Jill Clayburgh, all passing away on this date in history. Born on this date, Mrs. Howell on Gilligan's Island, Natalie Schaefer. Tales of the Texas Rangers star Joel McRae. Roy Rogers, born on this date, as was actress Vivian Lee, the accordionist on the Lawrence Welk show Myron Florin, and Ike Turner of Ike and Tina Turner fame. German actress Elke Summers is 82 today. From Simon and Garfunkel, Art Garfunkel, 81, who talks in this clip about how one of their singles broke out unexpectedly.
When I came home, they told me at Columbia that we've gotten some airplay response on your Wednesday morning album, which was at that point a year old, doing no business. But one of the songs in it, called The Sound of Silence, seems to be making some noise in the Cocoa Beach area of the Florida coast. And while you were away, we hope you don't mind, we went into the studio and put some electric instruments to give it more of a folk rock rather than folk sound. And what do you think of it? And they played it for me, and I, totally conditioned to failure, said, it's nice, but so what?
And The Sounds of Silence would become their biggest hit. Art Garfunkel, 81 years old today. From Herman's Hermits, Peter Noon, 75. Kris Jenner, 67. From Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Robert Patrick, 64. Musician Bryan Adams, 63. Tatum O'Neal, 59. From Scrubs, Judy Reyes is 55. From The Wire and Oz, Seth Gilliam is 54. You remember him from Parker Lewis Can't Lose and Stargate SG-1. I remember him most from the miniseries The Stand. Corin Nemec, 51 years old today. Guitarist and member of the Jonas Brothers, Kevin Jonas, 35. And from Supernatural and The Mentalist, Madison McLaughlin, 27. Those some of the people celebrating the 5th day of November is their birthday. If this is your birthday...
Hi, we're the 4 freshmen, and we just want to say, Happy birthday to you!
From 72 years ago, November 5th, 1950, Escape, Earth Abides, here on Classic Radio Theater on a Saturday on your favorite station. Thank you for tuning in to Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox here on your favorite station. This book that today's program was adapted from was an encouragement and something that Stephen King said was an inspiration for his post-apocalyptic novel, The Stand. In 1949, not many people had thought about the world coming to an end, and that apart from the possibility of nuclear war. But the fact that the world would still remain together in spite of a tragedy of this nature. And I'll be honest, when I saw the openings of what was going on with COVID-19, the first thing that came to mind was Earth Abides. And I hope you'll listen to this with the thought of what COVID could have been, but wasn't. We go back 72 years to November 5th, 1950, Escape, the adaptation of the George R. Smith novel Earth Abides.
You, finding life rather dull, dreaming again of exotic places, wishing you were somewhere else? We offer you Escape.
Today, Escape brings you one of the most unusual and terrifying stories of recent years. It is a story of such scope that the producers of Escape, in order to dramatize its full impact, will present it in 2 episodes. So now, with the performance of John Dehner as Isherwood Williams, we bring you part one of George Stewart's powerful novel, Earth Abides. If a killing type of virus strain should suddenly arise by mutation, it could, because of the rapid transportation in which we indulge nowadays, be carried to the far corners of the earth and cause the death of millions of people.
If you should awake some morning, tomorrow morning, let's say, if you should wake to a man-dead world, where virtually all of human life had been dissolved from the face of the earth, leaving behind only buildings, bridges, machines. If you should awake to such a world tomorrow morning, what would you do? Where would you go? My name is Isherwood Williams. I was a student of ecology. I was in the Northern California wilderness gathering specimens of rock, plant, and animal life. I was alone, and had been for a month. Climbing up to a sharp ledge one day, I felt a sudden sharp pain in my extended right hand. I withdrew it under reflex and looked up, and there, a foot above my head, I saw him, a rattler, coiled, ready to strike again. Slowly, carefully, I lowered myself and began to suck the poison from the bite. I wrapped a handkerchief about my wrist, tourniquet style, and headed for my cabin. There, I broke open my snake bite outfit, cut a neat crisscross in my hand at the point of the wound, and applied the rubber suction pump. Then I lay down on my cot. I felt sick. Sick because of the poison. Sick because I was alone. I was weak. In a few moments, deep, warm blackness closed in about me. I don't know how long I was unconscious, but I was awakened by the door.
Harry? Harry, look here. This one's still alive, I think.
Hello. I'm glad you came. I'm sick.
He's still alive, all right. Don't go near him. Come on, let's get out of here.
No, wait. I'm sick. Come back. Why? Why did they leave me when they knew I was sick? What were they afraid of? I tried to stand. My knees were like sponge rubber. But finally, I was able to stumble to my chest of drawers. And then I saw the hammer, my rock hammer, resting on the top of the chest. And it suddenly became the most important thing in the world to me. If I can lift this hammer, I told myself, I will live. I wrapped my fingers about its handle, and I lifted it slowly, then let it down. I breathed a sigh of relief. I would live. In the morning, I felt better. I got up, packed the car, and headed for the nearest town, Hudsonville, about 10 miles to the south. They'd take care of me in Hudsonville.
Consider, if you will, the case of the rats that once inhabited Christmas Island, a small bit of tropical verdure some 200 miles south of Java. In 1903, a new disease sprang up. The rats proved universally susceptible and soon were dying by the thousands. In spite of great numbers, in spite of an abundant supply of food, in spite of a rapid breeding rate, the species is now extinct.
Hudsonville. The familiar houses, stores, taverns, but no one on the streets. A hen scratched quietly in the dust. A lonely dog was howling somewhere. I got out of the car and walked into a little restaurant. The place was empty. Hey. Is anybody here? Hey! Silence. Deathly silence. On the counter, I saw a newspaper. Flipped it open. The headline,
Crisis. Acute.
I read the story, a dispatch from Washington.
The federal government is herewith suspended as of the emergency. All officers, including those of the armed forces, will put themselves under the orders of any functioning local authority, by order of the acting president.
Front page, column 3.
The West Oakland Hospitalization Center has been abandoned. Its functions, including burials at sea, are now concentrated at the Berkeley Center. Keep tuned to your radio.
The radio. The radio in my car. I turned the dial to the most powerful station in the vicinity. Static. Nothing but static. Desperately, I twisted it from one end of the band to the other, praying for a human voice, a bar of music, anything. There wasn't a single radio station still in operation. The horn. Someone will hear the horn. Come on. Oh, come on. No. Silence and death. I leaned back in the seat, exhausted. I sat that way for minutes before I looked at the paper again. The paper. The last sign of human life left to me. It was dated a week before. I read it through twice. Whole cities had perished. Medical centers, bodies. Doctors, nurses, burial crews hard at work, and then they too had fallen and died. The United States, the world, the stagnant flesh pool of death. Suddenly, with terror, I thought of home. I started for San Francisco. On the way, I helped myself to a tank full of gas at a station. Oddly enough, the pumps were still working. Electricity still flowed from the river-driven generators and the lights still blazed. I wondered how I had survived. Perhaps the snake venom had counteracted the virus. Perhaps the clean wilderness, who could say? But somewhere, someone else was alive. The men at the cabin door, there must be others, but where? I passed some cows in a pasture. Smiled to myself at the irony. The world belonged once again to the animals.
Ecological observation. Pedigree means nothing now. The prize, which is life itself, will go to the keenest brain, the staunchest limb, the strongest jaw. The champion boars will die in their well-kept pens, but the shoats will roam wild. In a few generations, their legs will grow slim, their bodies thin, their tusks longer. Man, they need nothing from man.
I passed 4 or 5 cars on the highway, abandoned. But farther along, I spotted another car, and there was a man inside. I stopped and got out. He had fallen over the wheel. There was a bottle beside him and the strong smell of cheap liquor. I shook him. Come on. Come on, wake up. Wake up.
Oh,
wake up, I said.
Hey,
come on now, come on.
Now, leave me alone. Now, you just leave me alone.
I said wake up.
Hey.
What's your name? Your name.
Oh, what difference does it make?
Now, come on. Don't go back to sleep. What's your name?
Barlow. Barlow's my name. 58 Barlows in the Seattle telephone directory, and I'm the only one left. Me, the dirtiest skunk of the lot. What am I doing alive? Answer me that.
Go back to sleep, Mr. Barlow.
Wait. Here. It's free on a house. Everything's on a house now. Have a drink.
No, thanks.
Hey, let me tell you why I'm still alive. Because I'm being punished. I'm not good enough to die.
Oh, goodbye, Mr. Barlow.
Hey, come on back. I'll buy you a drink. That's good. I'll buy you a drink. Look here, I got $500. I took it from a bank yesterday. You want it here? $500.
San Francisco. The mute, dead city of San Francisco. A naked forest of concrete with its empty streets, its ghosts of newspapers blowing across alleys. I crossed the Bay Bridge, stretched over the blank water. A single car, coupe, parked in an emergency recess, was its sole possessor now. The Bay Bridge. A final monument to the greatness that had been mankind.
The George R. Stewart novel adapted to a 1-hour radio presentation, which you'll hear this Saturday and next Saturday on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Escape. The news from November 5th, 1950, 72 years ago is next. Classic Radio Theater on your favorite station, an episode of Escape, the first part of a 2-part episode, Earth Abides, as it was originally broadcast Sunday, November 5th, 1950, in the newspapers of that Sunday, some 72 years ago. These were some of the headlines. President Truman lashed out at Republican critics last night and declared a vote for isolationism next Tuesday would be a vote for national suicide in the face of communist imperialism. In a free-swinging campaign address, the heavily guarded president said American leadership to repel aggression in Korea is the greatest step toward world peace that has been taken in my lifetime. And he said the Democratic Party has done more to defeat communism in this country than any other group, public or private. Meanwhile, Republican leader Harold Stassen charged last night that because the Truman administration coddled Chinese communists, American troops are now suffering their highest casualties of the Korean War. Replying to President Truman's campaign speech in St. Louis, Stassen declared in New York City that thousands of American young men are locked in a bloody battle with 100,000 Chinese communists in the rugged mountains of North Korea. Communist troops exploded a new attack from the east against UN forces on the Sinju front in Korea, while Chinese reinforcements rained down from Manchuria and massed west of Sinju. The communist conquerors of China pledged their full support last night to North Korea in its war against the UN and appealed for Chinese volunteers to undertake the sacred task of resisting United States aggression in the Orient. Chinese troops swelling the red ranks in North Korea may cause the U.S. Army to draft more men during the first 3 months of next year than the 140,000 it had planned to call. This would depend on whether the Chinese action results in prolonging the conflict. A well-informed official who declined to be quoted by name, according to Max Boyd of the Associated Press, predicted that the Army will have to raise its draft sites for the first quarter of 1951 if Chinese reinforcements drag out the Korean conflict. Those some of the day's top news stories from the newspapers of Sunday, November 5th, 1950 on your radio Escape, Earth Abides, which continues now on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox.
I drove the familiar route toward home. Turned right at San Lupo Drive, pulled up in front of the house. I walked up the stairs, took out my key, opened the door. Strange odor of must and stale food blew out at me. Mom? Dad? Mom? I fell into a chair and cried.
Observation. The desert and the wilderness began a long time ago. Men came only in the latter centuries. They camped at the springs and wore faint trails through the mesquite bushes. They laid rails, strung wire, paved long, straight roads. After a while, men were gone, leaving their small works behind them. In 1,000 years, at a conservative estimate, man will be a forgotten stone in the jungle.
Where would I go? I had no idea. I only knew I had to keep going. Change of place was my only comfort now, the only way I had of convincing myself that there was still life in the world. The snake bite began to hurt again, but it felt good, some small sign of living flesh. I left San Francisco and started across what had once been the United States, Route 66, through the giant Southwest. The towns, the empty, dead towns, the dust-blown, silent towns passed me by, one after another. Kingman, Flagstaff, Albuquerque, Oklahoma City. Just outside Guthrie, I saw a Negro tending his garden as if nothing had happened. He was afraid. He waved me on with a shotgun. In Tulsa, the sprinklers were still going in the park. I stopped. In Fayetteville, Arkansas, I heard music. Came from a little bar, neon lit, spitting its bright invitation to the empty street. I took my hammer and went inside. The bottles were stacked neatly, bar rag over the rack, and a broken jukebox, blazing in blues and reds, singing its song to the vacant, varnished tables.
And you just want to jump up and
shut
down
up.
like a carnival.
Shut up.
It's love.
Shut up.
There's a sparkle to me.
Shut up. Shut up.
But you're soaring to where? Oh, but it's
November 5th, 1950. Escape, Earth Abides. John Dehner doing a wonderful job in what essentially has been a monologue. The conclusion of this part next when Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox continues. Sunday's Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox will be Inner Sanctum Mysteries from November 6, 1950. Larry Haynes starring as Twice Dead. A woman apparently is returned from the dead, a box with $100,000 is missing, and an idiot brother is suffocated in the basement. That's tomorrow's Classic Radio Theater. Now the conclusion of Part 1 of Escape, Earth Abides, 72 years ago, November 6, 1950.
I slept in the best auto courts of the most luxurious hotels. I slept and ate from the leavings of 150 million people. All the wealth of America had been bequeathed to me. All its wealth and its death. 3 days later, I pulled up the Pulaski Skyway, crossed George Washington Bridge, came to Manhattan. The splendid, slow-decaying corpse of Fifth Avenue, the sable mink in the windows, the silly traffic lights changing color at naked intersections. Manhattan, soulless and dead.
Stretched out between its rivers, the city will remain for a long time. Stone and brick, concrete and asphalt, glass. Time deals gently with them. A window pane loosens, vibrates, breaks in a gusty wind. Lightning strikes, loosens the tiles of a cornice. The shade trees on the avenues die in their shallow pockets. Bats fly from the 59th floor. City dies slowly.
In the afternoon, I saw smoke from a chimney in the Bronx. I drove to the house, a small house, and knocked on the door. I heard footsteps. When the door opened, I saw a little, bald man with a broad smile, holding a handful of playing cards.
Milt Carson. How do you do? Come on in. You're in time for supper.
Well, thanks. I just ate.
This is Mrs. Carson.
How are you?
Won't you sit down?
Thanks.
Where are you from?
California.
I had a relative there.
We're just finishing a hand of gin. Say, look here. Isn't that a beauty?
Oh, the television set? Yes. Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's a combination radio, television set, radio player. I'll bet it even does the washing. It took us 2 days to get it up the steps from the radio store.
I always wanted a set like that.
Yes, but there's nothing on the air.
Sir, always wanted a set like that. Jen, there you are.
I owe you $10,000.
Well, give it to me tomorrow. There's a busted window at the Chase National. All the money you want. I carry $50,000 with me all the time just to be on the safe side.
Of course, you can't buy anything with it now, but sure feels nice to carry around.
how about some salami?
No, thanks. I just ate.
Oh, yeah. Say, do you like canasta?
Not much at cards.
Oh, canasta, I can teach you. It's simple, like rummy, but a little different. What I was wondering was, why don't you stay here? Got everything you'd want right here in the Bronx. Need a coat for the lady, break a window at I.J. Fox. You should see some of the diamonds I got Mrs. Carson at Tiffany's yesterday. Beauties. Hey, where are you going?
I've got to get started.
Well, where? There ain't no place to go.
Lots of luck.
Well, thanks, but I wish you could stay with us.
No, thanks. Goodbye. Oh, the scavengers. How long would they last? Through the winter? It was doubtful. There'd be no central heating. Even breaking furniture in the fireplace wouldn't keep them alive. They were like highly bred spaniels or Pekingese who walked the city's streets at the end of their leashes. They would die with the city a season or two later of pneumonia or accident. The Negro in Oklahoma with his heart to the land, he would survive. Milt Carson and his new wife? No. They were waiting for death at the card table. Two weeks later, I was in San Francisco again. The streets were just as bare as when I left. The lights were still on, but dimmer now. Water flowed still from the faucets. But San Francisco had a new population, the dogs. They hunted in packs, all breeds bound together in the common search for food. Danes, Dalmatians, Scotties, toys, all of them. The dogs had taken over the city. And I decided to move back into the house because of the familiar things. Late one afternoon, I went out to look around the neighborhood, and I heard the yelping too late. As I looked around me, I saw myself being surrounded by dogs. They were hungry, ravenously hungry, and they started to close in. The car was on the street some 50 feet away if I could make the car. The bulldog made a lunge for me. I kicked violently and started to run. They were after me, some of them running at my legs. He reached the car, opened the door, and slammed it. They climbed to the window, baring their fangs, their red tongues wet with hunger. But I was safe. Then the night. And that night, the lights went out. The lights? The lights? Hey, the lights! What's happened to the lights? I looked out over the city. It was black. Black as death. The age of electricity was over. Finished. And there were candles. Mom kept them for ceremonial occasions in the buffet, and I found myself hoarding matches and flashlights, candles, piling them up in the corners. There was only night and day. Time had lost its meaning. And I had food and clothing. And then I had books to read. The Bible. And I read the Bible.
Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine.
There was a faint but unmistakable light burning that night a mile away on Nob Hill. I got into the car and drove to the light. I parked the car. I reached for my hammer. In the window, a shadow moved. As I approached the door, a flashlight caught me in its glare. I stopped, dead still. I waited for someone to say, "Put your hands up," or, "Who are you?" There was a breath of perfume.
That's a nice car.
I can pick up a better one on any street corner.
Come on in.
Thanks.
How about some coffee?
Sounds good.
How come you didn't find me before this?
I just saw the light tonight. I decided to investigate.
I saw your light lots of times.
Oh?
You live down on San Lupo Drive.
Well, why didn't you come in?
Woman's pride. Man's supposed to come after the woman.
That was before. There are no rules now.
No, but they're habits. Want yours black?
Yeah, black's fine.
I don't want you to think you're the first one I've met. There were 5 or 6 others. They saw the light and they came in. They had coffee and I sent them on.
What about me?
I don't know you.
Well, I'm clean, well-educated, healthy, young.
Those are the good things.
I dislike turnips, canned beans, stupid people.
What's your name?
You'll laugh.
I would laugh. What's your name?
Isherwood, my mother's maiden name. Everybody calls me Ish.
Well, mine's Emma. Emma and Ish. Nobody's going to write any love songs with that combination.
No. Don't imagine they will.
I like you. Coffee will be ready in a minute.
Emma, will you come and live with me?
I don't know you.
What is there to know? That I like you, you like me. That we're both alone. Emma.
What?
Emma.
Yes.
Good.
Ceremony. There ought to be some kind of ceremony.
Have you a Bible?
Bible? On the mantle. I've never used it. I just had it. Here.
Give me your hand. Now, we shall be together always. Emma was warm and understanding, a good woman, a healthy woman. Soon there was a baby to be born. I had read some books, but I couldn't read enough. I stood by her during the night and tried to help. When the morning came, we had a son, the first born since the great disaster. Then there was the matter of time.
We won't need to know the exact hour.
No, that's true. The clocks have stopped, but what's the difference? We eat when we're hungry, and when we're tired, we go to bed.
But the months and the years. It's important to know when the year ends.
Oh, that's what I've been doing out on the porch.
What is that thing out there?
Well, it's a transit. I set it towards the sun, and when the sun reaches the winter solstice, I know that to be the shortest day of the year. And that will be our New Year.
Well, New Year's Day isn't the shortest day of the year.
No, December 21st is. And we'll make that our New Year. Man's always been trying to get close to that date for the New Year, but calendar makers always went off.
How long will it be?
A few days.
And then it'll be 1950 what?
No. That was the old calendar. This will be our year one.
The year one. We must call it something. I know. We'll call it the year of the baby.
The new life began around the simple problems of Emma, myself, and the baby. The day came when the sun reversed its path. I took my hammer and a chisel. Emma and I had found a tall, smooth rock in what had once been a small public park. In the rock, I carved the figure 1. The new beginning, I said to her. The rebirth of man. In the year 2, the rats came. San Francisco was overrun with them. They had broken into most of the grocery stores, torn open the cartons, gorged themselves, and gave birth to more rats. They multiplied by the hundreds and then the thousands. Rats, the carriers of deadly bubonic plague.
Come quick, they're getting in.
Where?
Here. And shoot through the door.
Oh, get me that kitchen chair. Hurry now, hurry.
Here. They're going to the bedroom toward the baby.
Now hold the chair against the opening. I'll nail it later.
The baby! The baby!
I rushed into the bedroom, taking my hammer with me. There were 2 of them, tremendous rats. I stationed myself at the crib. One came toward me, unafraid, for the fear of man had been bred out of them. And I flung the hammer at him. I missed. The rat leaped up into the crib. I threw a blanket over him and flung him to death on the floor. Then I picked up the hammer and threw it at the other one. Dead. But that was just 2 of them. Outside, I could hear hundreds squealing, their tiny feet scratching at the walls. How long would it be before they destroyed us? Man was gone now. This was the age of the rats.
Escape is produced and directed by Norman Macdonnell. You have just heard part 1 of Earth Abides by George Stewart, specially adapted for Escape by David Ellis. John Dehner was starred as Ish, with Larry Dobkin as Dr. Stanley and Peggy Weber as M. Featured in the cast were Michael Ann Barrett, Parley Bear, Ron Brogan, Paul Frees, and Lou Krugman. The special music for Escape was arranged and played by Ivan Ditmars. Next week, Escape will bring you the second half of Earth Abides, truly one of the most gripping and terrifying novels of recent years.
If you have never read the book, it is an astounding work. Earth Abides, Escape, November 5th, 1950, here on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Part 2 will be on next Saturday's Classic Radio Theater program here on your favorite station. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being with us on this Saturday. Visit our webpage, classicradio.stream. That is classicradio.stream. Stream our shows on demand. Learn more about classic radio collecting. You can contact me there, and if you like what we do and like to help us expand our collection, you can buy me a coffee. That's all at classicradio.stream. Thanks for tuning in. Tell all your friends the great radio shows are right here at this spot on the dial. Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox on your favorite radio station.